Good to go? All right. So now it's 7:04, and there are three of us present. So I'm going to call this February 10th, 2025 meeting of the Swampscott Planning Board to order. I'm the Vice Chair, Joe Sheridan, and I'll be chairing tonight's meeting. And present with me are members Angela Ippolito and Jer Germa. So our first item of business is an application for a subdivision 24 SUB 02 by Darius Gregory at 0 Mason Road. And we haven't received anything else here, right, Marissa? So
correct.
you want a motion to continue?
So moved.
Yep.
Oh, all right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Our second item is an application for subdivision 24 SUB 01 by Center Corp Retail Properties, Inc. At 450 Paradise Road.
Can
And
we
I
take
think-
that out of order and go to the third one, and then we can, because technically we're not, I don't believe we're here to discuss that without Mr. Horsfeld here, but I can go over it with you. The one that I'm concerned about this evening is the A&R that's,
Okay.
which is the third one.
All right. Yeah, I think that's fine. Okay, so this third one is an A&R 25 A&R 01 by Center Corp Retail Properties, Inc. Submission of a plan that is believed to be approval not required. So I think before we get into this, Ken, technically these are supposed to be filed, give us 10 days to review. So I think if we're going to hear it, we just need to waive that 10-day requirement.
I'll make a motion to waive the 10-day requirement for this A&R for Center Court.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, Ken.
Well, as you all know, an A&R is an approval not required. It doesn't even actually require a public hearing. It just requires a determination that the lots have appropriate frontage. It's more of a technical mechanism for recording purposes. In order for the Registry of Deeds to accept a plan, it has to be signed off on an approval not required by at least 3 members of the planning board. So this evening, what we're doing is there is a larger lot that will be subdivided to provide for the Stop and Shop on one of the 2 lots, and the second will be the residential structure that had been previously discussed and approved in the approval review process that we had a couple of weeks ago. I wish I could make it more detailed than that, but it really doesn't require any
That's
further
not
detail.
Yeah.
necessary.
Okay.
I don't have any questions. Jared, do you have any? Okay. Thank you.
And this, just referring back to the last meeting, this is based on financing.
Actually, the next matter, which is the remaining subdivision, which will require a preliminary and then a final approval, because it's more than just these 2 lots, is for financing. In order for everybody to have their equity interest in the parcel that they're going to be underwriting, they want a defined parcel. So there'll be no change in any dimensional requirements that had
Right.
already been reviewed. It's just solely for that purpose.
Okay.
And I think it's my understanding, if I may speak to this, that they just want to separate the commercial from the residential property and just make them, right now, they're kind of on the same lot, so it makes sense that they're 2 separate
There's
properties.
also multiple, owners with different
Right.
interests in this
Right.
property. And in order for them to secure their financing, this
Okay.
is the
So
way.
all they need to do is show that they have
Yeah.
frontage on a main road, which they, both of the lots do, so
Excellent.
I certainly don't have any questions.
So going to the one that we were just discussing, the A&R, that's the gist.
Okay.
So I would ask if, and as I said, it doesn't actually require a public hearing, it just requires that 3 members of the board sign off.
I can make a motion that we endorse the A&R as presented.
I would second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So what we need to do is we need to go over here and each sign a Mylar copy
Okay.
of this
This is the
form.
way John Hancock did it, so I want
Yeah,
our
so-
signatures to.
Shall we
I'll bring
do
my
this now, Or
Sharpie.
would you like to wait?
Yeah, let's just do it now, so that way
Okay.
there's,
Just have to check that it says that does not, no determination as to compliance with zoning. Okay, very good. You go first, because you're the chair tonight. And you a second.
Do we know if Garrett is on remotely?
You have to.
Check.
Do we need to print?
Nope.
Oh, wait, I think there's a bunch
Nope.
of copies.
No, he's
You
not.
have to,
Oh, is there more than
Did
one?
he
Yeah,
think
yeah.
because
There's
there
no,
was some issue?
no card?
No, not on these things. I'll just do a third line while I'm here.
Okay.
Oh, wait, this was not a, that was the paper, this is, wait.
We don't need to print our names after, so they're legible.
That's what that was what
Is it just one Mylar, Ken? Do you want all the paper signed too? Probably.
One is for recording. If you want to sign a copy, that would be great for our records.
Make sure I have. Turkey.
Okay.
Did I get them all? I think so.
No, you missed.
Oh, all right, I'll come back.
You want here now?
All right, sure.
Oh, no, you go back to, thanks.
If you don't mind just holding on to the original Mylar, and I'll figure out who's going to get it recorded. Yeah. And you may want me to record it, I don't know, but
Hmm.
How much does it cost to record one of those things? How much does it cost to record one?
not too much. But the recording used to be in Salem, it's now in Beverly. It's now-
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, so they closed that building, or what are they doing with that?
You know, you go into the new registry, it's in the Cumming Center, it's like empty. It's not a single book there anymore. All the books
I
are
used to love going to that Salem registry.
Well, it had
Then you'd have those guys in the back room and,
You're
whenever,
talking about the one on Federal Street, the old?
no, I'm talking about the one that's down on the water, that Shetland Park, is that?
Before that, it was the one on Federal Street. That was a trip. That really was quite the
I
place.
even loved going there when just to do research on, for a variety of things, gosh, But, they would have a lot of historical archival material in the back. You'd always get, they always had people there that were fascinated by the same stuff.
People
So
actually
they were
working-
only too happy to, take you back there and show you
Is that
these
no
crazy
longer the
plans.
case now?
Big old maps and stuff, I
No,
love
if
it.
you go in
digitized
there
now.
now, everything's been scanned in electronically, and you
Not
go
the
in there,
same.
it's empty. It's like, there's one person who's not even at the desk,
Yeah.
and you go, hello, hello.
And having it online is great, but it's not the same.
Because you can record electronically now,
Yeah.
whereas before you couldn't, and they actually looked at the documents, and
Makes closings much easier.
Yeah.
but
I'm sure.
it takes away a lot of the charm.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I was talking about the research part of it, that was kind of fun. So,
Okay,
Anyway,
we can,
okay.
All
I
right.
guess I'm on my own for this evening, so if we can go
Yeah.
back to the second one, I'll be
Yeah,
glad to
please.
respond to that.
Do you want to take it? So this is for 24UB-01 by Center Corp Retail Properties, Inc., requesting approval of preliminary plans for a subdivision.
Now, it was my understanding that we were submitting them so you could take a preliminary look at the preliminary plans, so we could discuss them. So what was earlier submitted, and hopefully it's in your package, was a preliminary subdivision plan that shows the breakup of the remaining lots. You probably have a larger
No, I don't
version of
have
that.
it. No,
The other thing that Garrett Horsfeld provided was this letter dated February the 5th. Did you receive that as well?
I think I forgot to print those out, but I pulled them up right here.
No, okay.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, we don't have prints of them.
Well,
My apologies.
Not a problem.
if, just for our benefit, if you could provide to them so they can review this for the next meeting, this would be,
Yes,
okay.
I believe I sent that out but I'll have it printed for the next
Okay.
meeting.
Because what the applicant is asking to do, and you can see it on, it would be 3, that would be this one here. It's just easier to see the lots themselves first. Is it?
On the first page?
This is Plan 3, yep.
Okay. You'll notice
Zoom in.
there are a number of lots, they're all designated as C1, C2,
Oh, right.
C3, C4,
Yeah.
up to, I think, C8. And those are going to be the new lots that we want to subdivide for purposes of the financing that had
Okay.
been earlier discussed. So we're going to be going through that process. I think at the next, would be the March meeting?
The March meeting, yep.
Yeah.
May I ask a couple quick questions, just for clarification? It would be my assumption, looking at this, that we're looking at Lot C5, Lot C7, Lot C8 as 3 different building sites based on the structures that have been proposed.
That's correct.
Great. And then C4 is holding the existing building that has Starbucks in it. C3 is everything but Stop and Shop. And then C6 is the building that has, amongst other things, Chipotle in it.
Correct.
Okay.
So I'm just,
So it's basically following the logic of how the project is being broken up for
That's
financing.
exactly right.
Okay.
I mean, if you think of it as a puzzle, this is the picture on the outside of the box. And we're just trying to put those pieces back in the same position that they were in originally,
Yep.
to give defined lot structure for purposes of defining the equity that they're financing.
I have a question. So if we're going to do a subdivision, then you're kind of, it's almost, where's the frontage will be on the access road? Because we're going to have to show frontage on a road. okay?
Well, you have it's interesting because.
Because right now, we don't need, it doesn't need
Right.
any
Right.
relief at all.
Can that frontage be a private road?
And
Yes.
it also can be waived.
But also, is Mall Road, is it private or is it public? I thought it was.
private.
Private road.
Oh, it's labeled public.
No, it's not.
No,
a
it's not a
private
public
I
road.
didn't think it was either, but it's labeled.
It is.
Oh, you're right,
That's
right
right,
there.
it's labeled
It's
public
not.
right there,
Which part?
How's it?
right
labeled?
underneath Mall Road, right here.
Look at the arrow.
I can't see.
I
Hold on,
can't
I'll
see it
zoom in.
either.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's funny. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not,
Okay.
So on that preliminary drawing, just as a note, that is mislabeled as a public road.
Right there.
right. So I guess, my question here is, number one, can we waive frontage? Because, when we look at it, so if you're doing this for financing purposes, it's not that I have any issue with it. I just want to make sure we don't get stuck anywhere.
I think the answer is, since this is being done in this B4 zoning district, and since it's being done as a review as opposed to a site plan, you have that waiving authority to waive virtually everything
Okay.
you want.
But I'll also point out that each of these lots has frontage if private road is allowed.
Of
for
course it
frontage.
is. Yeah, of course it
Because
is.
the
There are-
C3 has a leg down, the
Right.
C4 has a leg down.
So if you look at something like Atlantic Crossing, that's a private road, and all of those houses have frontage. So that's not, the issue of whether it's private or not is not my concern. I guess the concern is I just want, as long as they all have their requisite amount of frontage, or we could waive that piece of it. I mean, I'm really not that worried about it. The way this is zoned is that the entire parcel can be looked at as already having,
Right.
meeting all the zoning requirements, so.
Okay.
But it's fine. I don't want to perseverate on that, because I think there's, as you say, there's a way we can, So what we'd need then, when you come back, are the appropriate waivers, okay, to
Right.
requesting.
That may be addressed, I'll have to look in his list. Because I know at an earlier point, he was asking for the specific waivers that, let's see. Here it is. me do this. I will, before I misspeak, I'll find
Yeah,
out.
I don't recall, but I haven't, I may not be, I may not have seen all the documents, so I don't want to contradict what you're saying. You might have it already. Okay, so if we don't have the waivers, then we'll just want to
I'll
make sure
find
we
out
have that.
specifically.
I think
I think-
when Garrett had sent this around, this was this letter is like twofold. The first part of this statement here is the petition to withdraw the subdivision that we currently have on file. And then the second part is the anticipated waivers that they're probably going to
Okay.
officially come forth with next month.
Okay,
So,
I think the earlier one he felt had expired in terms of the timeliness of the filing in terms of then you're reviewing it, so he just
Yeah.
wanted an up-to-date one.
okay.
And so does Mall Road become its own subdivided lot as well?
I think the.
It's just a road.
It's just a road.
Yeah,
It's
it's
not
just
part
a
of
road
any
that's,
lot.
right, so
No,
each
I-
piece of
I
it
I
would
don't
be
believe it's
part of,
incorporated in any lot at all.
right. These lots just need to have frontage on it.
Oh, yeah, no, I
It's
get it.
That's an
Interesting.
interesting
I'm just
question.
wondering how it's gonna be broken up, because, Mall Road, the way this is broken up, it's not called out separately as it flows through the C2 part of the site.
Uh-huh.
I don't know that it actually matters, I just wanna make sure that the plan has everything identified correctly. Yeah,
Okay.
practically, like, I don't think it matters, I don't think we're concerned that there's lack of access to utilities or anything.
Right, right.
I just wanna make sure everything,
I think what they were doing is, C1 and 2, they were using Loring, Essex, and they're using the Mall Road as well as Paradise Road for the frontage on the other lots.
It's, yeah, it'll work out.
And I sort of assume in looking at this from the way the drawing is drawn, that on the Paradise Road side of things, like Lot C and Lot C7, Lot C8, it's just interesting that the Mall Road sort of vanishes during Lot C2, but I think that's because they were using the midline.
No, it's there, it's there. It's
I'm
there,
just trying to figure out.
right? It just looks different, the way
Yeah.
this is drawn, so I
It's
think,
going to continue to go through.
I would just say
Yeah.
that, when we get the final plan, they should make sure they articulate the roadway, so
Right.
it doesn't look broken up like it
Oh,
looks right
now
now.
I see what the break, yeah, I understand it now.
That's all. It's
Yeah.
fine.
I
And
think
probably, it's gonna be raised at some point in there too, like in front of C7 and whatever the one is next to it. It'll be, kind of have a bump or like a table, like a slower table.
I wish I came in with more information. I was anticipating.
That's
coming
okay.
in-
I think
coming
we
in
have
with
a good
the- with
idea.
The engineer who is going to be answering these questions for you.
That's okay.
For all I know, he's in the senior center where everybody else is.
Andy is online if you want to
Oh.
ask Andy any questions, but.
I'd like to know where Garrett is. That's really the question.
I told Garrett he didn't have to come because of work.
Is there anything else we should be
Are you guys
thinking
able
about
to-
in
I think
terms
Andy's
of?
trying to talk, can you raise the volume?
Hold on one second, Andy, there's just a volume problem in here.
Okay.
Yeah, not a problem.
Try again, Andy?
No, I.
There you are.
I don't have anything to say. I'm listening to the conversation. I think you guys all understand it. Mall Road is, there is really no Mall Road. It's just kind of like something that's been adopted as a name for just driving through our parking lot.
So you can rename it if you want to.
Yeah, but I mean, for the purposes of
Andy's
this,
Road.
Roseway.
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 there you go. And for the purpose of the big question is, no, there won't be a separate lot that contains the road.
Right.
It's just contained in the easement, that each of the C6 which exist now, and then everything on the shopping center side that's being cut up. I think it's pretty straightforward. And that Garrett has asked for a waiver of the street length, but notes that the Mall Road, within parentheses, goes and connects with the Stop and Shop parking lot.
Right.
Very good.
Do you mind if I ask my client a question?
Sure.
Where is Garrett?
I told him he didn't have to be here, because I thought I got him away that we decided we really weren't gonna talk about it, and we were gonna just refile and discuss it in March.
Okay.
So we're gonna refile the preliminary plan, and we're gonna discuss that in March? Oh, then it's not,
No,
I'm sorry.
no,
The preliminary plan was, the one that you have is the one that's.
Okay, that's
the
still
one.
preliminary, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
so we've got an A&R plan, right,
Right.
which is C1,
That's all done, right?
Yeah, totally separate. And then the Garrett felt, because it was so totally opposite of, where we started on the other side of the road, and came up with a different solution for the Essex Street side, half of the property, so to speak, that the filing, even though we continue to extend it, really doesn't relate. It would just be better and cleaner to just submit a new subdivision plan. Here are the lots, here's the waivers, here's my frontage here, here's how it works, and it doesn't work, and this is the relief that I need.
Okay,
And I think we were fine with it. And that this is not super time sensitive,
Okay.
Yeah.
like the other parts have
Okay.
been.
no, I don't see any issue with it. I think, Jared brought up a good point about just the articulation of the roadway, like right now, you've got that big split between the lots, you're just showing the lot line between Stop and Shop and the rest of it, and it looks like the road gets kind of broken up, so I just think that if it looks like all one piece, that will be better. But it's fine.
Right.
I only have one last.
I don't have any questions
I
about
have
it.
one last question for you, Andy. How you feeling?
Yeah.
How you feeling?
I tested out of COVID today, so I actually feel way better.
Oh, good. I didn't know you were sick, so I'm glad.
Good.
But I can hear it in your voice, but I can,
That's his new voice.
I'm glad you're on the mend.
Thank you.
So what is the request tonight then?
Well, the only request I thought was, I was under the impression that Garrett was going to go through this with you, so you would have some information, so you could digest it. So when we came to the March meeting, if you had any questions, we would then know them, so we could then address them to make the meeting more eventful.
Here's, the only thing I would request is that, we'll obviously, you're going to file the definitive plan, however many days in advance of our next meeting, that we have the list of waivers at the same time, so that we just have time to go through that list, and if we have a question, we have time to get back to you, so that you can adjust anything we need to have clarity on. But that's all. I just want to have a little time to make sure we have time to look at it.
Angela, I signed the application today.
Okay.
Garrett's sending us the plan, and we're gonna pay the fee, et cetera, so it's imminent, the next couple of days, we're gonna be filing
Okay,
the application.
very good.
And we have all the waiver requests.
Terrific. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else that the board sees at this juncture that they would like us to address, so we'll have it for you at the next meeting?
I might just acknowledge to formally acknowledge to withdraw the other subdivision we have on file. We have Garrett's letter, and so just to withdraw it.
We'll make a motion to, do we need to move to withdraw that? or
Accept the withdrawal.
We
I
can
guess.
make a motion to accept the withdrawal of the previous subdivision application.
So moved.
Okay,
All those in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Okay, so I'm fine with this, and I can see you took that little nub off of the corner across from Chipotle.
Yeah, that's in the construction documents, yeah.
Okay, good. All right, good.
Great. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
Andy,
you.
rest up.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Okay, then.
All right, the next,
Probably your earliest night of the week. Huh?
yeah,
Well,
seriously.
you know, we try our very best. I generally fail when it comes to getting you out early.
And you did it all by yourself, so there you go.
No, you helped.
All right, well, thank you, and
Thanks, Ken.
we'll see you in March.
What we need is a new building commissioner. Can you help us on that?
Yeah, well, I wish I could. I think it's a, it's a good job, why not?
Go for it.
Cute little
You want to be the
town.
new building commissioner?
I'd need to get that book of yours so I can polish up my skills there.
All right.
Although I probably
good.
have a lot of good historical stuff up here. Let's hope. Okay, anyway,
All right, so the next item that we have is just this discussion of proposed amendments.
Yep.
And the three that we have are the modification of the ADU bylaw to meet the new criteria, amending the site plan special permit square footage criteria, and then updating the coastal flood overlay district bylaws, also to comply with new state regulations.
right.
You know, maybe we should just start with the ADU one. We can
Yep.
take each in turn, I guess.
Yep.
So for the ADU, I don't know that there's, if anyone has anything to say, of course, feel free. My take is sort of, the state is requiring what the state's requiring,
Yeah.
and that we should just be modifying the bylaw to reflect that. I would like to amend the bylaw so that it actually says, I think one thing that we could have done is sort of have like, sort of footnotes or something like that. I'd rather just amend just restate the whole thing so that no one's confused in the future.
Well, we do have to, when Melissa submits it, she has to submit the original with all the
red lines.
The red
Red
line,
line, yeah.
right. So that's what we don't have here, we just have the new chart.
Right.
So, my only, I didn't read through this, to be honest, because I know what the differences are supposed to be in terms of the by right issues. I guess I should read through it just to know how lenient it really is, but I can see that this is just the table that, I guess this is what you.
Yeah, the table is what spells out, like, the
Definition doesn't change, the
main
as-right use doesn't change.
aspects
One
that are
per
changing.
lot. It may allow more than one per lot through special permit from ZBA. And would that have to do with, do they have to comply with setbacks or stuff? Or
Absolutely.
is that all that? Okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
But you still need to have enough room on your lot to put all
Correct.
this stuff?
Yep.
Okay. And, my big concern about ADUs in particular is just fire truck access and stuff like that. So I'm sure that we go through that whole process. Owner occupancy, that's gone, right? So they don't have to, one off-street parking, it's different if they're located within half mile of the train station,
Transit, so that could also mean a bus route, so,
within half miles.
I think it's basically the entire town.
yeah, that's,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think if you
give or take.
think of where our buses
Right.
run.
Yeah.
So in other
Yeah.
words, you don't need to have a spot for a
No.
car.
Yeah, if somebody comes in for an application and says that they don't, for an ADU and says that they think they don't need parking requirements, we at least have the GIS capability to blast a half-mile radius from the closest transit station to see if they fall within that.
But
that
even
ring,
if they
but-
do, and what if somebody has the car, I guess we can't do anything about it, is
No, we
that
can't
it?
enforce it, yeah.
So,
Okay.
and with that, is it transit route or is it transit station? So is it a bus stop or a bus route?
It is a bus stop. It's an actual stop where says it in the state thing. It says, explains what, a transit station is identified as a subway station, a commuter rail station, a ferry terminal, or a bus station. And then a bus station is identified as a location serving as a point of embarkation for any bus operated by a transit authority. So,
Okay.
up and down Paradise Road,
I'd be
Essex
super
Street.
interested to see is there a way to really check that? Where
Yeah.
we could.
Oh, yeah. I could do that.
the
Yeah.
GIS, because
Yeah,
it
we
would
can
be,
do
it
it.
would be useful to know ahead of time.
Yeah.
If because there could certainly be
I
a
think
few
my house-
odd little curved triangles.
I can tell you right now that my house is not within, I know exactly where the bus stop is, but I know it's probably a little more than a half mile from my house.
Yeah, I would imagine
It's up
your
on
neighborhood,
Humphrey, So I'd
like,
have to leave, there's nothing on Puritan.
No,
Yeah.
but I believe it's going to be a radius of a
I mean,
circle.
if you can't walk through it, you can't get there. So I don't think it's as the bird flies. I think you have to actually be able to get there.
I'm thinking
think
it's
it's
as the bird flies,
yeah.
believe it or not.
Okay, well, I
Yeah.
still don't know if it would be, but I think there are gonna be some areas.
oh, certainly,
But
like, I would imagine, like, anything along, like Atlantic Ave going
Yeah.
toward Marblehead is probably not within
I don't
the,
know, because there's the there's the 442 comes right.
but doesn't it make a
does,
left up
but there
Humphrey
isn't a
Street
Stop.
and then goes,
The Humphrey Street's, with the end of Salem Street,
yep,
so, and then down by,
Is there nothing that runs Atlantic Avenue?
I thought there used to be, but
it's up
didn't they
by the
recently
Marblehead line, I
change it?
think.
I'm sure there are some,
Yeah.
some spots.
But it would be very interesting to
Yeah.
just sort of see if we have zones that's,
That wouldn't apply to.
Yeah.
it'd be good to know before the permit is pulled.
Yeah. I mean, I just think it's
Yeah.
interesting, that's
Yeah.
all. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't, I don't know that it's gonna make a huge difference in any event, but it'd be good to know.
We could, assuming that it's gonna be that, if there are gonna be fewer parcels or fewer properties that are exempt of this requirement, we could make a list of all those, like we have a list of all the properties in the Olmsted Historic District.
That's what I'm thinking about,
You know?
is that
Yeah.
instead of it being something a neighbor notices after it's permitted, it would be good
Yeah.
to know.
Yeah, at any rate, okay, yes, and I agree with you on that. And in terms of design standards, I mean, I think it's talking about unreasonable design standards. I think, we look at for site plan now, is that something is harmonious with its surroundings? I mean, you wouldn't want to see like you don't want to see some colonial house with some, just basic cinder block in the backyard, you know what I mean? Like, nobody wants to see that. So I think that's reasonable to think that it would actually, be harmonious with, and that's all that we require. I mean, it's not saying it's got to have a dormer here and a window there. I mean, we're not-
On this chart, on the current Swampscott bylaw, no reduction in pervious area. And then across from that, it says change, no municipality may enforce a design standard on an ADU that they would not otherwise impose on a single-family home.
Right.
I'm not-
We do impose it. You can't, well, open space is open space, so you still have to have
Right, I just am
25% open
curious
space.
Why,
And that has to be, it has to be pervious. So I think when they say no reduction in pervious area, no reduction in open space, I mean, I think that'd be a better way to put it.
Right, that was
Because
the bylaw that we came up with.
Right.
When we put it
Right.
up- when we put forth our local bylaw a couple years ago. So you could,
We just.
but
yeah.
the no municipality may enforce a design standard on an ADU.
That they would not otherwise impose. We do impose it on single-family homes. That's a norm.
Oh, okay, that's why that's there, okay.
Right,
That's what,
okay.
because on the design,
In other words, they're saying you can't make it more rigid
Yeah.
or more difficult for the ADU
Right.
than it already is for the single family.
now, I have no idea if, like, that design standard there, in our historic districts which are the only places where there are design standards, that's gonna hold tight
obviously,
for that. So that's the only place where there's fully a review on the designs of the structures.
that and I guess the Humphrey Street Overlay District. If there was a single-family
right.
house with an underlying A4 zone that, that could have an ADU
Okay,
in the Humphrey Street Overlay District.
so as long as those are still protected, that's just
Absolutely, yeah, those aren't going anywhere.
perfect.
The short-term rental aspect of it was something that concerns me, so
Where are you on that What page?
I'm not there yet. I'm just just glancing through everything else. Wait a minute, what's a protected use? An attached or detached. What is protected by MGL Chapter 40A, Section section 3.
So let me,
See, I mean, it says here, you can't impose design standards. I'm kind of going back to your issue with historical, like even, 760 CMR and 310 CMR, they all mention historic districts in terms of them being, you can waive a lot of this, you don't have, in other words, if we probably do have to raise the fish house, but they're saying if you needed to rebuild the fish house, you don't have to raise it because it's historic district. That's basically in the mass law now, but getting to this.
are you raising RAISE or are you RAZE?
No,
Raise,
raise,
okay.
elevate, sorry.
Yeah.
Elevate the structure.
Big difference. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah,
I
sorry.
guess a
It's
question that I
so
have,
I'm just looking at historic district because they do mention that.
where do you see that?
In
the
the
last
definitions.
page. Oh,
It's in the definitions, and then I'm going there now.
Oh, the left, okay. Because the other one that jumped at me in here was that you were allowed to tear down, and I just am curious, pre-existing detached structures eligible for conversion to an ADU may be demolished and reconstructed, but that's not,
No, number 8 in the last page, are you there yet?
not yet. Oh, so I'm in the executive, this thing.
You're talking about a pre-existing bylaw that we have in our,
Right.
Okay. So wait, the second?
Municipalities may establish design standards and dimensional standards for
Yeah, it
protected
says
use
8.
ADUs
right at the top.
that are more restrictive or different from what is required.
Yeah, that doesn't have an 8 on it.
Oh,
So I think there is an exception for that.
Oh, found it. I was looking, I'm sorry, I was not looking at it like an indented data. I was looking
Oh.
at the 7103, and I'm like, it doesn't go
Yeah,
to.
okay.
May
But
establish
Let me
design
see, where was the short-term rentals issue?
right, that was the one that I was
right,
looking for.
right, couple underneath historic districts. Municipalities may establish restrictions and prohibitions on the short-term rental of protected use ADUs. So,
Where, I used it underneath, oh, yeah, there. it
That's
is. Sorry.
C,
Yeah.
line.
Yeah, yeah,
line
yeah.
C.
May establish restrictions. Okay, so that, what do we have in our bylaw about short-term rental?
nothing,
We should.
we should. That's
I
something
mean,
that
I think that's, the problem with, and they even mention in their states thing, it's like, oh, they're not just talking about creating the granny flat for, the family member that's gonna be kicked out of their house if they
Right.
can't afford, or the young, the kids that aren't gonna be able to buy their own house, and so they need to be able to live. But, when you start, and that's why people can deal with it, if it's all the same utilities, and even if now they're, getting rid of the family relationship thing, okay, whatever. But, when it comes down to, when you start pushing what could possibly be a transient nature, like if you own the house, but you rent out the house, and now you decide to build an ADU in the backyard, now you're gonna rent that out too.
right.
I mean, there's just a transient nature, it changes everything. And especially in some, in any neighborhood, because we're small, but especially in like really kind of tight neighborhoods, I mean, I just think that's a terrible thing to put on people that don't, you don't want to feel like it's every 2 weeks or even once a month. You've got
Right.
somebody new in there. And I think that we've got to, we need to add something in there. And I don't know what best practice is, what are other, towns doing, but I
Yeah.
really feel strongly about that.
I know that in our last meeting that we had with, when Ted was here, he was saying that short-term rentals overall is a bylaw that I think we want to look to incorporate next year in 2026.
But I do think if we let this go without it, we're in trouble.
It's
This is already in
something,
effect, right?
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah, so,
Now that we have to change it, and, it's loosening up a lot of
oh,
the
totally.
little protections
No,
that
I
we have.
agree that we should put something in place, but I'm just
I
saying
just
this is
think
already in effect.
there's gonna be so much, we're gonna be on a slippery slope.
hopefully in a year, talking about from now, and like a year from now, hopefully there won't be that much of an influx of short-term rentals, especially within ADUs, because since we've approved the bylaw a couple years ago, we haven't seen a huge amount of construction.
But I
of
think
them,
if they
and so-
were allowed short-term rentals, you might.
Well, they technically are already, because
Right.
we don't have any short-term
Right.
rental bylaws,
Which we
so.
need to, so.
It's technically a free-for-all across town.
It will happen because we have a lot of short-term rentals
Right,
in town, and it's just a matter of time before it filters down.
right.
And I think that we need to be, if we don't put something in there now, we're just gonna be in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's actually not even in the spirit of the ADU bylaw. It's really, somebody going month to month is not.
Right.
It's not
Sort of
creating the kind of housing.
Ironically, that's one of the things that ADU is, this battle is happening at the same time that municipalities are curtailing short-term rentals because of the impact on
Right.
rental housing. So, yeah. This is just a curiosity, but address assignment, I'm assuming where we have all of these streets that have, like our street really goes every other number, so is this using A's, or what is the?
I think
No,
whatever
it would just be
Wanda-
one mailbox for,
Ah.
it would be a shared address, even if it's.
So they don't get a separate address?
Nope,
Okay.
nope. Attached, detached, it's all one and the same. The only, because designating a separate address would identify a second dwelling.
Okay.
A second principal dwelling, and the point of this is to maintain it as accessory to the principal. So that's
I
why there's
see.
a shared.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's just interesting that it says that, like, the number 8 is all ADUs shall be assigned an address consistent with the most current address standard published by Mass GIS.
Well, so in other words, it would be like my house address is published on Mass GIS. So it would have to be the same.
Have to just be
Address,
that address,
right.
okay.
Yeah.
That property has an ADU on it, exactly.
But it just seems funny to me, all ADU addresses shall be reported to Mass GIS and EOHLC after assignment. That's,
Well, then they know which lots have it, but it's still gonna be
Yeah.
the same. That's how they're gonna be able to track it. Because you're not creating a new address.
Right.
it just seems funny that that doesn't directly say that.
Now, interesting, how does that, which one that we haven't talked about, how does an ADU affect the assessment on someone's home and someone's property? I would imagine it's gonna increase the tax burden on the owner.
Yep.
If I build a 1,000 square foot thing or 900 square feet in my backyard, and it's this cute little mini house, that's gonna increase my, I got utilities going out there, a walkway, its own little garden, whatever. So now I've got quite a bit more property, and it's worth more, right? So my tax bill's gonna go up.
Certainly.
And you,
though, right?
and I guess it would only go up based on square footage, because it wouldn't be based on potential income, because that would be taxed separately, not as property tax. So it seems like it would be.
It's an income producing, well, some of them won't be, like if my
Yeah.
mom was living somewhere.
But I think it would be, I think it would really be on the square footage and
Well,
room
and I think
count.
that's the way they look at it now. They look at it by the zone it's in, desirability, I suppose, the amount of space, and the amenities, right? They have like anything else on the lot that makes it nicer.
Right, and if like the
Whatever.
unit is the
there-
dwelling space is classified as having a full bath and, what kind of appliances it has and
Right.
what kind of utility hookups it has.
Well, just what it says on your assessment card. So, and then they'll, Ken's asked.
Are you opening up for public comment?
Yeah, we can. You know what, give us one more minute. I just want to jump back to Angela's
Sure.
comment quickly, though. So I'm just looking at the MGL 64, which is the one that, the statute that's referenced
Okay.
with the short-term rentals. And so it says that we can limit the number of days a person may operate and rent out an accommodation in a calendar year. So maybe we should all just think about that a little bit. I don't know if we're thinking none, or if we're thinking that there should be some
Well,
limited amount, but
Yeah,
also
365.
365, okay, so none,
A
right.
1-year rental. Like you'd have to rent any other place.
Oh, you're saying, so is that I guess, may operate and rent out?
Just like you'd have to, where else can you get a lease
see,
for
the way-
a
the
good
way I read
rental
it-
property
the way
that's
I
not
read it-
a year?
I wonder if, So the way I was reading it was that you could sort of limit the total number of days. I don't know,
Oh, that it's
I don't know if
rented,
That's
that
what
it gets,
its
I don't know if
intent
we
was.
can say you have to rent it for a
no,
minimum.
just a
number of
minimum. In
days.
other words, it can't be rented out for short-term periods.
Right.
And that's what protects us.
Does it use the word minimum in there? or
No, so that's what I'm
maximum,
saying.
or
The
just-
way I read it was that you could say, like, you could use a maximum of
Yeah.
certain days. 'Cause
Oh,
it says-
I
It says,
see,
under this
I
section,
see.
the number of days a person may operate and rent out.
Oh,
an
I
accommodation account.
misunderstood.
So,
you.
like, on the Cape,
Yeah,
different jurisdictions allow you to rent your house
Right,
for
vacation rental,
up to
sure.
2 weeks a year without it being considered a business.
think that's
and
what it's
Therefore
saying,
being
yeah.
taxed.
Yeah.
So that could be given some consideration.
why? It's a
Well,
vacation rental.
it sounds really
It's
crazy,
transient.
but the, some of the reasons that that might occur would be, people that get out of town and rent their houses for different events that are happening, like sailing
You have to-
events
you
that are
have to,
happening in
uh,
Marblehead,
Frame
et
it
cetera.
in terms of how it's helping with the housing crisis. That's what ADUs are all about. How does it help with the housing crisis? I don't care if someone's renting out their house, good for them.
Yeah, but at the same time, if you minimize it, they likely, no one is going to build a house to rent it out for
A year?
4 weeks, 4 weeks
2
a year.
weeks.
You know, I don't know,
No, but it just,
but I also don't know if it needs to get legislated.
yeah,
So maybe
I'm
this is
not
just one we
comfortable
have to
with
think
it
about a little
personally.
bit.
That's my feeling. I think, are we doing short-term rentals or are we not? It's a year lease, I mean, if we want to help with housing, and that's what this is about,
So the
then
policy,
people can rent like they'd have to sign a lease anyplace else, if they're renting, that is, and have a full year lease. That's housing, not
What is
popping
the-
in and out for 2 weeks.
what is the current policy on non-ADU short-term rental?
We don't have one.
None.
Okay, so I think what has to happen
it's
is there
like,
has to be
you know-
one that's written that covers both house and ADU, because you can't really have two
Well,
separate.
now that we're changing this one, I think that we have to, now that we're in the process of amending this bylaw.
Technically, we have we have implicit language in the bylaw that I think we could build upon to create a more robust bylaw that will allow us to enforce short-term rentals, but it's this idea that when you have an accessory structure, be it an accessory dwelling unit or a pool, its accessory use is residential because the principal use is residential. And if you produce income off of that accessory use, you are changing its use from something that is residential to something that is commercial.
Commercial.
And a commercial use is not allowed in a residential district.
Right.
So
But
there's.
in ADU, the whole purpose of this now, you can have anybody can live anywhere. You can be renting out I can own my house and move away and rent my house out, and I can build an ADU in the backyard, and I can rent that out. So, what's to prevent my neighbors from just having a constant stream of people short-term rentaling?
Right, I think sort of.
That's what this says we can restrict. I think what
Yeah.
you're saying though is like,
But
okay.
it's housing, but I'm
no, I
saying
understand, but if
frame it
someone, if
with
someone goes
housing.
away and they're leaving for a week and we limit it to a week or 2 weeks, no one's gonna build an ADU just for that purpose. And I think what you were also sort of saying is, if we say they can't, well, people might just do that anyways.
Well, then, at least we have some protection if it happens, because, it definitely happens, and I know it's, I just think that some people may not care, but I think those people that do care should be protected from, someplace that turns into just a, revolving door.
No, I
of
agree with the
people in and
revolving
out.
door. I think if someone wants to rent out their house for a week, that
And it's
doesn't really
not,
harm anyone. It doesn't incentivize the ADUs, but I totally agree. I don't want people
Right.
building ADUs to have year-round
Right.
renters.
And again, my whole point is that it's not compliant with, it's not in step with the spirit of the law, which is to produce some housing for people. It's a place where they're gonna rent and they can live, that's, would be cheaper for them than someplace else,
Right, yeah, we're not trying to build hotels.
right?
Should we open this one up to public comment?
I have a couple of questions, if I could. I'm not speaking on behalf of any client, I just had some questions. The first was, is there going to be any site plan oversight on these ADUs? Because if you're limiting new construction, which was 3,000, and taking out that parameter and just any new construction, would they have to go through site plan for every ADU?
Yes,
Okay.
Yeah.
The second was,
which they should, especially.
you said that the first ADU, by right, any additional ADU would have to go through a special permit through the
Right.
Board of Appeals.
That's what this new, the
Do
state's bylaw
do we have any
says.
criteria for the site plan special permit for the second ADU?
Just that it has to comply with zoning. Your
Well-
setbacks and stuff like that. I don't know that
And I
we even
believe-
have any lots in town that are big enough.
I believe the state's policy on the second ADU is based on the number of units in the main building, if I remember right. So if you have a 2-unit building, you're allowed to have 2 ADUs. Like, it's sort of a strange,
Yeah,
it's going to be interesting to see.
that's what I'm
So
trying
if
to
you look,
understand.
isn't dependent on the size of the lot, it's dependent on the number of units.
That's the
So a
only-
single family
Well-
could have fewer ADUs
Yeah.
than a 3-family on a smaller lot.
But the thing is, they're still individual little accessory structures, so you still need to meet setbacks.
Yeah, they still have to comply.
And, you can't just jam them all together.
Well,
you know.
for instance, with special permits, there are parameters. In other words, it says you have a certain amount of set, but some allow for 20% off of that, or 15% of the height. So I was just curious whether those site plans, those special permit, dimensional special permit criteria would apply to the ADU.
Oh, absolutely.
The same way.
Absolutely.
The same way as it would for that particular district that the ADU is located in.
So, to make
I
one.
see what you're saying.
To make one
But-
clarifying point, though, I think in earlier iterations of this draft bylaw, and I also feel like when I attended some of these working sessions, that this was brought up, that the regulations would apply to also multifamily zone districts, but this final version is saying that it applies only to single-family residential zoning
Oh, it does?
districts. Yeah.
Because you remember that conversation, because
Yeah.
I was thinking that I had
Right.
heard that
Yeah.
in presentation.
Unless we're
Right.
both going crazy, but I feel like I
Well-
remember it too, so.
Yeah, and the thing that disturbed me about that was I was able to sort of think about a structure in town that is a multifamily house with a very large carriage barn. That according to it, based on that conversation that you and I are remembering, they could end up having multiple units in that barn and get it through, where all of a sudden they would go from having 2 or 3 units on the property to 5 or 6, which was quite an increase.
Can't, I mean, more than one ADU doesn't mean that it can be a bigger ADU with 2 bedrooms or anything. It does, it doesn't
No.
mean that they can both be in one building.
Yeah, but it was a case where, what Marissa and I are remembering, that conversation
Okay.
was really about, like, if you had condo ownership of a building, or even multiple units in a building, they could build an ADU for each. And in that case, I was immediately thinking to this place where, you could do that. So that's good that that's not in there.
Yeah, exactly, and so.
But I am sort of confused by the second ADU going in front of the zoning board of
So-
appeals, because
That was my question.
When,
Yeah, I don't know why.
imagine like a very hypothetical situation in which you wanted both your parents and your in-laws living together on your property. And
That in
if
itself
you
is
just
problematic.
decided to walk that fine line,
Build a small noose for yourself.
and you had 2, granny pods two detached granny pods in your backyard, you probably would have to have like at least a 30,000 square foot lot to be able to like accommodate 2, because also remember the size dimensions, like they're also based on the size of your principal dwelling. So you max out at 900 square feet. But if your house itself is only 1,200 square feet, then you max out at 600
Right.
for either one of them. And so, and then they've both got to be set back 10 feet from your house, but also 20 feet from, or 10 feet, I guess, from the rear yard, the rear property line.
This sounds like a Lincoln problem, a Lincoln and a Concord problem, not a Swampscott
Not a
problem, in the
Swampscott
sense that
problem.
we don't
Oxford
have.
problem.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. The 2-acre lot problem is.
exactly,
not ours.
yeah.
Exactly
You
right,
could
but there's just like woods and woods
Put in a
and woods.
tourist, a set of tourist
They
cabins.
could have like their own little trail guide up there or something.
Actually, I had one other question that dealt with the issue with the rail and the areas that are covered by the transportational lines. Were they just talking about bus stops or bus lines? And I know you said it was.
Bus stops.
Well, it has to be a
But-
bus
but
stop.
does it have to be a defined, for instance, we're putting in maybe a new bus stop station where they had a bench. Is that, I don't know what defines an actual bus stop.
I think it has a
Any
sign
point
that
it
says
has
Any
bus
point that
stop.
someone gets on or
Right.
off a bus.
It's
So,
a
so if I were to
designated
flag down,
stop.
if I were to flag down a bus, and I'm not actually at a bus stop, and I'm just raising my hand, they pull over.
They're not gonna stop you.
He'll never stop for you.
I can tell you don't ride buses.
Yeah, yeah.
They're not allowed to
Oh,
stop
they
you.
can't? Oh, I haven't ridden
No.
buses.
Oh,
No, no, no,
liability.
they're not taxis.
Yeah,
They're-
No.
as long as it's marked
Yeah.
by a post with the bus routes that are
Okay.
serviced
Yeah.
in that.
So that's the radius that I work off of. And those are defined, and you can actually look,
You
Yeah.
can,
see on a
you
transportation
can.
map
Yep,
Yeah.
where they are.
they're on the map.
So it's not going to be an ambiguous thing. These are
No,
very
no, it's
defined.
not, that's why I asked the difference between a route and a stop, you
Yeah.
know, because if it was a route, then you're pushing a half-mile swath.
I used to run after buses, and they would stop for me, but
Well, you know, if you
Well,
look,
that's if
you
you like,
look
if you were
needy
at the
enough,
stop
it's-
and you were just late getting to the stop and they're just pulling away and you're like,
Yeah.
and maybe.
Yeah.
But they're not
But no,
gonna
they,
just,
they.
if you're just
you-
walking down the
You can't get them to
street.
stop wherever.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you know, it really depends on the driver. I've seen people, you know, get their umbrella stuck and the doors closed and they start pulling off and drivers saying,
One
"Oh,
driver
we'll
wagged
see
his
you at the
finger at
next
me like
stop."
he was
Right.
being disciplinary
Or
action.
Ken, you could
trying to
wave
flag him down.
a 20,
God.
maybe he'll stop.
Yeah, it really is. Person to person.
Okay,
All right,
Thank you.
thanks, Ken.
Thank you for
All right,
that.
we'll close public comment on that one. Anything else before we move on to the next one?
nope.
Okay.
So did we decide on the rental aspect, though, the
Well,
short-term
I think
rental?
we have to, of course, is it possible to see if there's like some best practices?
Yeah,
like,
Certainly,
Okay,
yeah,
so
yeah.
let's leave it there and we'll take it up.
all right.
That would be great, thank you.
And I mean, and I can also work with KP to see if we can sort of elaborate on what I was talking about, that sort of implicit language we have in the bylaw about
Yeah.
not commercializing a residential accessory use.
Right, I don't think it's strong enough, to be honest, but I think it's
Right,
good to
no.
have it there, without a doubt,
Right.
but I think we need to give it some teeth.
Yeah, absolutely. And like,
great.
and plus you know, if the purpose of this is just to regulate short-term rentals and not actual like year-long leases, you know, we want to make
No,
sure that we
I mean,
distinguish.
it's meant for housing.
Right.
Right, and people are gonna rent them,
So
so I
the-
think
the-
that we have to make it, you know, whatever is reasonable anyplace else you'd rent a place.
Right.
I do not know what mass law is on this, and because I don't own rental property here. In California, you have a 1-year lease, and then you immediately drop to month by month. Is that the case in Massachusetts for rental?
Yeah,
Well,
you
if
can
s-
go.
if the lease- if the
Tenant
lease
at will.
expires.
Tenant at will
then-
is
then-
a whole
then
other
It just
thing.
continues, but, you know, it's on a month-to-month
Yeah.
basis.
Because
I
I
don't
think
know.
that's an area that it restarts, so that, we just have to be careful how we write it. 'Cause
Right.
we
Yeah.
don't want to be stating that, you know,
long
every
as you
year
can
you
use it
have
for
to
at
have people
least-
in 24,
Yeah, right.
or excuse me, 12 or 24-month leases. I think it's perfectly normal for people to be able to.
Or maybe
rent
they're,
stuff.
you know, they found another place to go where it's you know, they can afford a better place or whatever, they were saving and they're gonna, you know, 6 months
But
into their
it's a-
second year, they wanna get
I
out.
think as long as
But
the
it's-
initial term is.
Yeah, the
Right.
initial term is 12 months.
I
yes.
would agree.
We don't want to lock, because again, you know, in the housing crisis, there are some renters that need that flexibility
Yeah.
to be able to, and not be taken advantage of, because there's nothing like.
But I would
being
agree
stuck in
that
a
there's
lease.
no place that you're not gonna be able to get a 1-year lease, you know,
Yeah.
so.
Could I ask one more question?
Let's move on to the
All right.
the next one, I think, Ken. I don't want to just open it and close it. if that's
No, I just wanted to comment on one last thing.
So amending of site plans, special permit, square footage criteria, I don't think we have, you know, anything written out here. What we were discussing at the last meeting was just, I guess there were two things that we were discussing. One was whether or not we wanted, additions to homes that are under 800 square feet to be subject to special permit, and whether or not we wanted new builds just generally to be subject to special permit, whereas right now they're subject to 800 square foot and 3,000 square foot thresholds respectively.
So I'd like to address that if I may. I mean, my priority with this was talking about any new construction. So any new construction of a single or two-family home, doesn't matter if you took down 90% of the building and you're half the building, you're putting it back up, it has to go through a site plan special permit, and doesn't matter how big the building is or was going to be. Anything on, any new construction of a single family or a two-family, anywhere, needs a site plan special permit.
I would also say, I personally think the 800 square foot addition being the trigger, that is a huge addition.
It is a huge addition, and I couldn't
I-
find any other, towns our size that have it. It's all
Yeah,
under,
and-
it's 500 or
And because we
under.
have so many small lots, I think it would be very wise to just eliminate both of those minimums and think about, or really come up with a square footage that makes sense, where maybe we don't want to be doing it when someone is putting a bathroom addition on a house because they don't have a first floor bath, or something like that.
Well, that'd be under,
That's what I'm saying.
that'd
but-
be way under
But
anyways.
800 is a 20 by 40 foot addition,
It's
which on a
big.
residential property is huge.
It's an ADU, basically.
It's an ADU, or you can think about it, it's the footprint of a 1,600 square foot two-story house.
Right.
So like a good-sized Cape house, it's a big
Yeah.
footprint.
So,
I guess, can I ask, so I'm fine with the status quo, so I'd like to know why you both think it should change.
because I think that, first of all, I think that the additions, many of the additions that we've looked at over, that are 799.9, square feet, are, they're built either above a garage, or a garage is added on to a house, and it has really imposed upon me, they always have to go to zoning for relief, and they typically get it. And now they're up, I could pick out a bunch of recent, even over the past few years, I can think of ones that they really start to impinge upon other people's property, just for the sake, and it's the McMansionization of a lot of houses. So there's that one piece of it. But the other piece is that it doesn't give us any kind of control over any type of site plan review. And some of them that have been just lobbed onto houses are for lack of a nicer way to put it, they're just, terrible appendages that are, I don't mean to be rude about it, but they can be really terrible, that are a real detriment, not just to the property, but to neighbors. And they're in everyone's line of sight. And I just think that it's not unreasonable to have some oversight on it. I just don't think it's unreasonable. And 500 and under, that's the way Marblehead does it, and no matter where they are, whether they're in the old town, if they're on the neck, it's 500 or under, or over, pardon me.
Only certain districts.
I would also just sort of say, I think my feeling on all of this is it is a planning board, a planning office. It is about our common existence. So the shared existence of neighbors. So though it may be a bit of an impediment to the person that wants to expand a house or alter a house, the value lies in maintaining the values of everyone's home in the district. So that's why I personally think having review, having moments that people can come forward and express concerns I think it's a good role to have, and I think it being something, 10 years on the Historic District Commission, and there are people that are upset by having to follow rules, but there are a lot of people that have an appreciation for the stabilization of their neighborhood, of their largest investment in many cases. So I think just as common practice, it's a very sound thing to have things in step, because when a house is in a neighborhood of small lots, that scale of addition or that scale of building can be really overwhelming. And I think those numbers probably came in at the same time that a lot of the sort of standardized setback rules and so forth that were adopted without thinking about what the impacts were. Because I think there's a lot of things that could be improved and tightened.
Yeah, and a lot of the, we've also had a lot of construction right on the coast where people have not complied with the proper type of building permits, or where they've been able to scoot around it. So there's a couple of things. The sheer number of applications that have to go to zoning, as opposed to just coming to us, if they're meeting all the criteria in zoning bylaw, ZBA wouldn't have to look at anything. But nobody ever is, because first of all, we're small, and second of all, people are gonna, they want to make the most of their lot, and everyone's pushing the envelope. It's height, it's setback, it's this or that, it's frontage. The frontage things don't bother me, because we have pre-existing lots, as long as we can sort of make something fit. But it's other stuff. It's squeezing in a lot of house on a lot. And what's happened over the past, over COVID, it was particularly bad, but when but most building permits for additions happen online. Okay, people go in and they file an online permit, and no offense to any, in particular building inspector, but we've had such a revolving door of building commissioners and building inspectors that, a lot of times, someone's there, somebody new steps in, they're looking at something they don't know, and they're, calling out estimates. Oh, I don't think it's 800 square feet. And when we know for a fact that I can name, one that's just down the road from me, that was well over 1,200 square feet that was added to a house. And it's a two-family besides, that was just flat out not addressed. Oh, we didn't think it was over 800, and, we didn't think, just because they tore the second story off, we just assumed that we were counting the house that was, and this was from the building inspector, and stuff does not get looked at. It does not get looked at, and what we end up getting is a mishmash of anything goes, anywhere, where we, normally never would have, anybody that's, actually complying with our bylaw has to go through a process, and these people don't go through a process. And it's not, it's not right. So we had so much of that happen during COVID. The whole mess with 53 Puritan was all because of a building, building permits that were applied for online. And that's just, that's a glaring example, but there are many. Just go online and look at the number of permits that are done that they just get, it's under under 800 square feet, boom, boom, boom. No, they never get looked at, never. They don't get looked at for what's being blasted away. The thing on Salem Street is obviously another big example. That lot with the number of trees, they were told, the building inspector was promised that it was under 3,000 square feet. It's not, it's 4,400 square feet. And there's nothing we can do about it. And they blasted and chipped off the top of the lot. There are numerous trees cut down. The drainage pouring down into the neighbor's historic house is appalling. It's, there are a lot of mistakes that happen in this town all the time. It's not like one in a million, it's routine. And I don't think that someone that's putting a 500 square foot or greater addition on their house is going to, be, it's really a big hardship for them to have to pay, to submit a plan. That's my feeling. And I've just seen it messed up for years. And as far as building an entire house, that, to me, that's There's no argument there at all.
Yeah.
You know, it just, that's been a big problem for years. So, I feel very strongly about both of them, about limiting the addition to, 500 square feet or under, let it go, and 500 and over, and any new construction.
I think 500 is too big.
That's
Too big?
That's my feeling.
It's 25 by 25, isn't it?
Yeah. What about making it a percentage of, I don't know if I have to think about it for a second. I don't know if I'm thinking percentage of the existing square footage or the percentage
Marblehead
in
is
relation to your,
15%.
Pardon?
Marblehead is 15%.
15%?
yeah, because obviously a 500 square foot and 800 square foot addition is going to look very different on a house on
Yep.
Little's Point Road than it
Yeah.
is on a house on Erie Street. So,
I would think to keep it under the dimensions of a two-car garage would be an intelligent place to cut it, because I think that's sort of a given addition that a lot of people put on that can be very overwhelming on a house.
I'm still sympathetic to people that want to make changes to their homes.
So
but
am I.
But I hear what you're saying.
I'm not saying don't do it.
No, no,
I'm
no,
just saying go
no,
through
I
the
understand.
process.
I understand. I guess I'd want to know, like, what would if ZBA is already sort of addressing scope, right, and that sort of thing.
They don't, they're just
don't.
looking at the number of feet. They're not looking at the building. They don't,
I guess
they're
when I
like,
say scope,
is
I
it
say
gonna
like
fit?
intensity regulations, right? So like,
They're not even that. They're just saying, okay, here's what's allowed in the bylaw. You can get 10 feet. We can give you another 20%. And, okay, we'll do it. That's it. They're not looking at the building. They're not looking at the massing. They're not looking at anything. They're not looking at the trees, the nothing. They only look at what they can, somebody goes to them, it's the zoning board of appeals. They only go if they have to appeal,
sure.
right, or, whatever, the bylaw, so, and the zoning board is allowed to do by percentages or,
Sure.
whatever they can, and we rarely grant a variance, so, but if they can grant the relief, they do. And there's nothing else that they look at.
Yeah.
What is the fee for coming in front of this board?
Mm.
Because one of the questions I would have,
Fees are in
It's the
here.
same fee-
equivalent to ZBA,
It's the same fee when you file for the ZBA.
450.
It's $450.
Well,
But
400
plus the $50
plus
for
a $50 advertisement fee. However, additional $50 per bedroom. So it's 400 for a standard 3-bed. The per bed, it's an additional $50 per bedroom. So if you have a 4-bed, it's 500.
But did you ask what the fee
So
was?
on.
because
Oh, sure.
I guess what I
Right
was
here.
curious about, is there any way to, when you're doing an addition on a house, to have the fee somehow be reduced? I mean, one of the issues, like historic district, 0 fee
Right.
for getting the
You
permit.
create your own fee structure.
We can create our own fee.
Because I mean,
so-
if
so
the hardship is financial, that would be one way that we
Yeah.
could address that.
Yeah, we could definitely do that.
The hardship of having to defend what you want to do in a neighborhood, I don't really consider a hardship. I consider that process. So, it is a case where it's very easy to look at communities where, just from the work that I have done, communities that have very strict rules and regulations, what those communities look like, what their property values. It's a protection of asset. And it doesn't allow things to be ripshot. But, you can look at Houston where there's no zoning, or you can look at, different cities in California, Piedmont, California, where there's very strict zoning and process. And, there's the people benefit from it more than people are hurt by it.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, I hear what you're both saying, and, I'm just one member of the board, but, I might be open to reducing the square footages or something like that, and I would certainly want to, like, adjust the fee structure. Whether or not 3,000 square feet is the correct square footage for a single-family home is a open question, but I don't want to impose too much of a burden on people that are trying to do things on their property. I don't know if this also sounds like it's a little bit of an issue of like design guidelines too, maybe? And I'm
Well-
wondering if there are other things that we should be doing to,
Not really. I
Address it?
wouldn't say it's really an issue of design guidelines. It's an issue of, lot development. I mean, I think that it's an issue of the site itself, how a building is positioned, of, the steepness of a driveway, the amount of trees that come down, the location of utilities. I mean, there are so many things. To me, in my mind, any new home construction should be looked at. It's just, it blows my mind that there are some that we don't look at. It just does.
It throws me significantly that there are no design guidelines except for the historic districts in this town.
Well, and we say,
And I don't think it's to the benefit of the rest of the town. I mean, I think one of the finest examples is not in our town, but what has happened to the historic stucco house out on Lynn Shore Drive is a really good indicator of what can happen anywhere
Yeah.
that does not have guidelines. It's like a Chick-fil-A. And
now that's kind.
it's there. Not really, if you knew what I thought of Chick-fil-A. But anyway, but the thing is that is, I don't know. I am all for protecting people, but I'm also really for protecting people that need protection. And I really feel when people have the ability to be doing these kinds of projects, they can get guidance. I will also point out the project that is now under construction on Humphrey Street, and I can't remember the name of it, but over by the police station that came through here. That's coming in, and it is the right scale, and it is the right, that's the kind of input that we're able to have as a board that really created a project that is much better because of review. Would you agree?
I would, of course, it's my project.
That was
I
his
thought it was
project.
Yeah, no, but I think what we did with them and helped them, it not only helped the town and the neighbors and the values around it, it helped them.
So I would agree with Jared that I don't think that the person who is building the home, who has every right to build the home and will be able to build
the home.
it, are the only people that have rights. We're a community here. We all live together, and I think that everybody, the neighbors have rights. I think
Right.
everybody has rights, and everybody should be able to, those people that live downslope from that new house that went up on Salem Street, they had absolutely no say, no recourse, nothing.
I also think too, that especially when it comes to new construction, the people who are building these homes are not necessarily the homeowners, they're developers. I can't remember the last time I saw a new construction that wasn't led by,
House, right?
sorry?
That wasn't a spec house.
Yeah, or that
Essentially.
wasn't applied for by somebody in construction or property development. With residential additions, I think I could be a little more sympathetic, because I think that's the kind of site plan application where you'll see like somebody just applying for an extra bedroom or a family room or something like that. So, I don't know, I see both sides, but I think I personally am all for eliminating the requirement for new construction. I just think that it's an arbitrary number to begin with.
Yeah.
And I, like, whether it's a tear down rebuild or you're building straight from virgin land, which we have very little of to begin with, no matter what way you roll the dice, the site is going to be altered significantly. And I think that it deserves to have review
I do
before
too.
the board.
One of the things that I also think a site plan review can do is it can help to avoid litigation. In a situation where, like the property you're talking about that did such massive earthwork, created flooding, what is the neighbor's recourse? Because the neighbor's recourse is likely only legal instead of input and concerns to create ways to mitigate. And that legal,
They're not gonna do that.
pardon me?
No, they're not gonna do
No,
that.
no.
Yeah.
They won't do that, but you know, it could be saving not only the developer, the homeowner, it could be saving the town.
Right.
Because if we have permitted something that puts feet of water into the basement of somebody else's house, they may see the only way to correct it is legal action. So having eyeballs on it is not a bad process.
Do you guys mind if I open up to public comment?
Yeah, I just have a couple of
Love
quick, if, it's just so I can leave. I agree with Angela, and I just want to sort of give a little bit of a historical perspective. That 3,000 number is a number that I know very clearly because Gene Barden and I were discussing it, because Gene Barden was a former member of the planning board. I know you know him, and I think he was chair for about 24 years. He was very concerned about, these homes being torn down and big ones going in their place. So he and I talked, and we came up with this arbitrary number of 3,000. Where do we get it from? We got it from probably the Lincolns and the Westons, because we had no guidance. They were the first of the towns to get really nervous about building these enormous homes. Mm-hmm. That's where these numbers came from.
Didn't help.
It was purely an arbitrary number. We didn't have a scientific way of assigning a number to Swampscott. So I wouldn't put a lot of credence in 3,000. It was just you had to pick a number.
Yeah.
And that's the number we picked.
But
Similarly,
that's interesting, because the lot sizes in the towns that probably had these.
that's right.
Yeah.
And what became very problematic is 3,000 in one lot is very different than 3,000 on a 30,000 square foot lot. But we never distinguished between the zoning districts. We just picked out the square footage. Similarly for the additions as well. The other problem that came up was there was a real liberalization of the zoning bylaw with a case called Barletta, and you should read it. It pretty much eviscerates the authority of the zoning board on 1- and 2-family homes. They can pretty much do far more than they ever could before. Half the cases that now come before the zoning board, they say, we have no authority anymore, you can just do it. You should read Barletta, because it's very informative.
Bar-Levitt?
Barletta. If you don't have it, I'll get it to you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Because more often than not, if I'm representing an abutter, I have no authority anymore. They said, we've made a determination that you can do it by right because you're 1- or 2-family. So there really is less and less Barletta.
The one that the ZBA referred?
Yeah.
Belalta.
How do you pronounce it?
Belalta.
Okay,
Belalta.
Belalta. Belalta.
right. I can spell it, I guess I can't pronounce it.
Wait, spell it one more time.
I can send it to you guys.
We'll see, yeah.
Belalta.
It's a
Versus
more
the
recent
town of
zoning case,
Brookline.
there's actually one after that, but it liberalized the process to the point where your concerns, Angela, are real. And people are able to build all sorts of things, and there's absolutely no oversight, because they don't think they have any authorities, or jurisdictional authority to say no. So I think site plan is now probably the strongest thing that's left, because Barletta didn't talk about site plan. They talked about zoning. They talked about special permits. I think it was a Brookline case. I think it's important that there be oversight. As far as the amount that's charged, you can pick $50 if you want to.
Right.
If you think that's in fact the issue. Because there
I
were
don't
so
think
many
it's the
people
issue
that
for
live right
Grand
next
Pass,
door
but,
that
No,
lose,
but conditions.
completely lose their view. They can't see anymore.
Right.
They don't see any more sky. And they say, well, there's nothing we can do. Why? Because the wall of the house is already that close. But the fact that they go up a story and a half is outside their jurisdiction now.
Right.
So all of a sudden, their sky is gone, their light is gone, and the board says this, we're sorry, we don't have any authority. It's very frustrating to tell a client that there's nothing they can do. And suing isn't going to solve the problem either.
No, but it's going to cost people money.
Well, I would recommend that they not spend the money on the lawyer just to get their
Yeah.
angst out, because
Yeah.
they're going to lose.
Right.
Because the state has liberalized and taken away a lot of the authority of zoning boards as it relates to that issue.
I mean, I just feel like a site plan special permit is just not that hard to do.
My only
Just isn't.
concern is that when you bifurcated the process, instead of having one board
Well,
doing it
there-
all,
You can't have a Board of Appeals reviewing site plan. Even when we
Well-
switched to Ken and they were doing the site plans, they weren't reviewing site plans.
Hey, you know something?
We were still doing all the work,
they weren't. They
and
weren't-
then we were sending them the comments so that they could write the permit.
I agree.
I mean,
I'm
it
very
didn't
familiar.
change anything.
They didn't do their job, doesn't mean that they couldn't have done their job.
Well, exactly, but that's not the job of a Board of Appeals. A site plan is not an appeal. It's a
No,
whole other
but once
process.
upon a time, a site plan was a site plan review. The minute all of a sudden it became a site plan special permit, it was more consistent with the zoning, needing a supermajority,
Well,
things that were very
Site plan
different.
review doesn't have
I'm not
any
saying,
teeth,
I'm in
so-
agreement with site plan. I just wasn't
If
completely.
we had the site plan special permit and it was followed, you're not gonna have all these problems going to zoning in the first place.
I think they dropped the ball, but I didn't,
Oh,
I
I
just
agree.
thought, one other suggestion, and I promise I'll leave you alone. And the suggestion was holding your meetings together. If there in fact is both a zoning issue and a site plan issue, that they could be scheduled for the same evening. I'm just trying to cut down on costs.
That's interesting. So has that ever been suggested to anyone before?
Back
I didn't know
when-
we could do, I suppose, I don't know.
I don't-
When
they-
Heather came to the meeting, when we were hearing 40
Yeah.
Eastman back in October,
Yeah.
September, that, I was on the phone with her and I said, you know, this was one of those months where we had you guys back to back because
Yeah.
of a holiday or
Yep.
something. And so I said, you know, and 491 Humphrey for that matter too happened the same night. So I said, you know, it might be good for you to come to the meeting just so you can see what the planning board talks about. And then that way, at least going into your ZBA meeting tomorrow night, you have a clear recollection of what was discussed. And so that's where that came from. And,
I've been bringing it up for a while.
yeah, I think it might make sense, especially for
Makes sense, too.
commercial
Yeah.
site plans. I feel like if you're gonna contemplate a residential addition, maybe, but,
It also allows you to have,
You know, we get it ahead of time. If we know it's gonna be problematic, I mean.
it allows
Right.
you to talk to the zoning board. And the zoning, I mean, your decisions are unique, but it doesn't mean you can't collaborate. And it also makes the process a lot easier for an applicant, as well as for an abutter, to not have to go to all of these meetings.
I
And it
agree.
cuts down on their
I don't have a
costs.
problem with that. I mean, I think it's an efficiency we can do. I think in that case, we really need to look at the burden of how many things are on an agenda.
Right.
So that we actually can get through stuff, but,
it might be something where if it's just one item that concerns that, you know, both boards have jurisdiction over.
Be the first one
we
on the
could- Or
agenda.
we could set it aside and create a
Yeah.
separate meeting. That way you guys can tend to your other
I
items
mean, I don't
separately.
know what you guys think. I'm not opposed
So-
to
Open to
that.
it.
Just for clarification, so basically, a joint meeting for the portion that needs to be joint, and then switch it.
Yeah, and then
You know,
you guys would
go to
have your
two separate
regular
If we get an
separate
application in and we're like, it's fine, it's like, you know, it meets all
Right.
the setbacks, it meets the height,
Right.
it's, you know, whatever.
whatever, you don't need to have a joint meeting for that, but for something
Right.
as big as 40 Eastman was,
Right.
especially where you had that sort of bounce back.
Right.
Because of the architectural amendments that were made, and for 491 Humphrey, because that was in the coastal flood overlay zone, you know, like that. I think those would have benefited from a joint meeting, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I think it's a really interesting concept.
I think it's I mean, I have no opposition to that.
Well,
at all.
good. I guess my purpose for being here.
There you
is
go.
Yeah,
not
my
entirely
work here
lost.
is done.
Well,
Ken.
you know, it's interesting too, because I know that historic district, we had something go very south at one point where the homeowner had an approved plan and then decided they wanted greater ceiling heights. So they went to the zoning board of appeals and got the building height approved without anyone telling the historic district. So then when they built it, it was completely out of proportion. It wasn't
Well,
at
the other
all
thing is
what
that
we
they should,
had
you know,
approved.
That they should be, you know,
But that sort of coordination between is,
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
anything that we can do to tighten that, because that turned into a,
yes.
I think the historical commission has the same problem with the demolition. They feel like they weren't brought involved.
Right.
So that, you know, there should be some dialogue amongst the.
And that's the other thing, even the way that bylaw is written, which, don't get me started on that, but the, you know, saying that if the building commissioner thinks that it's if the building commissioner thinks it's 75 years or younger, they don't, and they can just, say, oh, well, I was looking at this date, this was the last date it was modified, so I used this date, and it never goes to historical. I mean, there's all kinds of crazy stuff that happens.
Well, and I think one of the things, just in talking about the turnover in the building department, when you start realizing that the committees have more longevity, we have to start structuring.
We do.
The actual security of following policy into the committees, because they are turning into being the long-term.
We're more long-term regulatory than people in town, not talking about you.
Not
Melissa,
you.
but-
Not your
Hasn't
office.
gone on 5 years.
But, it's like.
No, but it's a
You know what I
case
mean?
where
It's-
Yeah, no, I
It's
do.
a revolving door sometimes, and,
sometimes,
yeah,
always.
well,
I mean, I've lost count. In 20 years, I have no idea how many people have been in that office, but I know how much re-educating different,
I can tell
Missions
you,
it had to do.
the number is staggering.
yeah.
And I'm not sure why. I don't know what the
There are,
explanation
I
is.
think, multiple reasons, but,
And because there are multiple reasons. That's exactly right. And everyone has a different reason they give me for why they're leaving.
yeah.
the one thing that I'm unclear on, is it a Swampscott phenomena, or is it a phenomena? Is it like the superintendent of school average in the Commonwealth is
I sort of liken
incredibly
it
low?
to coaches and teams, they're great until they're not so great. They go to another town or another, and then they're the general manager again, and they have a life of their own. And they just,
Right.
at one moment, they're just switching from team to team to team, and building inspectors have historically been doing the same thing. I don't know. Anyway, thank you
Ken.
for
Thank you.
putting up with me for.
No, and thanks for your input,
Yeah.
it's helpful.
Okay.
Now you can talk behind my back.
Coastal flood area overlay. You sure you want to leave before we dive
Yeah.
into this?
Which one is left?
Coastal flood area overlay
It's
district.
not gonna be called that anymore.
Oh, flood area overlay district.
The flood, I think we're gonna use I
Yeah,
think
the
we
state's
should
term, I
use the
agree.
state's term.
Yeah.
Floodplain overlay district.
Yep.
Oh, the word plain is not showing on page 42.
So you should-
Oh, I know. That's why, these are comments I made when I was at home.
But other than that, I think this is, I mean, anybody speak up if they'd like. I think these are, sort of are what they are, right?
Yeah, I would take even, yes is the answer to that. And I also actually had excuse me, before we jump off site plan altogether.
Yeah.
I just had a few other edits in the site plan review and special permit, and it was literally like just some edits, Marissa, that I can send you, so nothing that's gonna
Sure.
concern
Yeah.
anybody besides, there's like, we're talking about site plan special permit, and then it says, following the granting of relief. Well, we don't give relief in site plan special, so,
Right.
that's a zoning term, little things, minor stuff, someplace where CF, the coastal flood area is mentioned, that we want to take that out and change the name. So I can just give you my corrections and we can
Okay.
update that.
Speaking-
And you guys, it's nothing that's meaningful to discuss.
Since we're getting into floodplain, something else to consider for site plan special permit, and this is something that Marblehead has, is that they require any structural addition in a floodplain overlay district to be site plan.
Well, I think it should. I really do. I mean, that house on Puritan Road that's building a garage
Yep.
on, that would not have been allowed under this state bylaw.
Right.
Under, what do you call it? It was 760, because 760, was it that one, or was it it was one of them. It was one of the state bylaws, either the 310 or the 760, that basically says that if, any kind of building that is taking place in a lot that has that's either, that has two zones,
Yep.
the more stringent zone will apply. to any-
Only if the structure, the way I understand it, only if a portion of that structure lies within the more
It
stringent
doesn't
zone.
say that in the new language. It doesn't say
So
that.
760 CMR, or you mean 710 CMR, because that's building code. But
it's,
I can double check, but
we're looking at
I
here.
believe
Wait a minute. Let me get my new thing.
that when a property has AE and VE being the more strict,
Yeah.
AE being the one that you can build within.
Oh, sorry, 780, so 780 CMR is the building
780,
code.
yeah.
310, that might have been environmental protection. It might be under that one. I have it at home. I
Okay.
pulled it out. But
It's always been,
it's good to review. We should
Yeah.
go over it to make sure I have my facts straight, and that was my understanding.
okay, I'll double check on it too.
In any event, they had, you had mentioned, Joe, that you thought that, the word, the language that Marissa had inserted from the Massachusetts model into our model. The only thing I would add was there a little bit more of a, I like the introduction that they use in terms of purpose. And we go right into purpose here. Need to minimize flood damage, taking into account, blah. This is really the language that Kleinfelder gave us, and taking into account the effects of long-term sea level rise, which is fine to have in there. But I do think that, there was what else?
Yeah, I'm all for more of an intro
Yeah,
if it helps to set the stage.
I think this was it. The local floodplain overlay district is established as an overlay to all other districts in Massachusetts. A floodplain overlay district bylaw or ordinance is part of a federal requirement for communities that choose to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program, which we do. However, the state already administers regulations that take care of many. Referencing existing regulations is important to ensure that projects have been reviewed under the appropriate state regulations and that variances to the conditions of the bylaw do not erroneously allow variances to state requirements. And then it says, all development in the floodplain overlay district, including structural and non-structural activities, which is important because we have a lot of, revetment going on, whether permitted by right or by special permit, must be in compliance with the following, and it lists 780 CMR and 310. Then, then for those NFIP requirements that are not found in the above, the community must adopt these requirements. I mean, I feel like putting this language in our bylaw gives it much more teeth.
Okay.
Instead of us, you know how it can go even at town meeting when people are like, well, why are we making it harder? And and sometimes it's just, some people know, but a lot of people don't know.
Right.
They're just not aware of the regulations.
Right.
And I think it's important that as an educational piece for people to understand how necessary this is and how it's essentially required by our state and sometimes our federal government.
Right.
There was this, just a couple of paragraphs from this beginning page. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but
I agree.
I'd like to see it in there. And then, of course, naming it. So a couple of things. We already have what's called our floodplain/wetland protection overlay district. So the idea would be, and that is 4.1.0.0, our proposed new floodplain overlay district, which is currently being called the Coastal Flood Area Overlay District, is 4.2.0.0. So, I know, as I mentioned to Marissa earlier, when we first sat down, I know Tony Bandritz from, Concom is very interested in updating some of the language on the wetland protection overlay. That word floodplain should really be eliminated from 4100 because the wetlands are their own thing. Wetlands do already cover floodplain, so in that are the floodplains that exist in the wetlands.
Right.
So wetlands are wetlands are wetlands. We have been calling it floodplain wetlands, and then when we just had the coastal flood area overlay.
Right.
So often when we had projects that were in, that were in a flood area, they were looking at the,
Oh, at the
the
wetlands.
floodplain wetland,
Sure.
and saying, oh, no, it's not in a wetland, it doesn't apply, when it does apply. This is,
Right.
so we need to sort of rework and just take
Right.
all this, new state language, give brand-new teeth to our coastal flood area overlay, which is kind of like a limp little name, and make it our floodplain
Yeah.
overlay district.
Because the reality of wetlands too is that like there is, and I guess sort of twofold. The reason we're changing this from coastal flood to floodplain is obviously to encompass all of the areas in town that are
Right.
subject to flooding, some of which are because of pre-existing wetlands.
Right.
But wetlands themselves are
They have-
dealt with differently.
Right, they're in their own
than
category, exactly.
Floodplains. And even from a conservation perspective too, because the wetlands itself, you can't touch. The only thing that you can actually build in a wetland is like a bridge. Like at the last meeting when we closed out on Paradise Road, somebody in the comments suggested maybe like activating the wetland space in front of Stop and Shop there by constructing pedestrian bridges or something like that. That's fine. That's a regulated activity. But the flood areas themselves that might surround wetlands, you can build with those. You can build in those with certain restrictions.
Right.
Both from a zoning standpoint and a conservation
So
commission standpoint.
this is just sort of a random question, but when I think of the floods that have occurred in this town, many of them have not been on the coast, and
Right.
many of them have not been near wetlands.
Right.
And really have a little bit more to do with the
Drainage.
infrastructure,
Yep.
drainage and the infrastructure.
That's right.
Yep.
So it's the built environment.
Right.
Right.
So are those caught in the
They don't, some of them
flood-
don't show up
flood
on,
zones?
they
Yeah.
don't show up on the state plans, which is all that we can deal with.
Yeah.
That issue is a really good one to talk about. Vinton Square is a perfect example. When you look at that part, especially the parking lot on the Kimco side, where literally, cars can float away in that, sometimes it gets so bad. But that's why, the issue of drainage and pumping, being able
Right.
to have them underground pump stuff and having the proper, drainage receptacles is so important. Which is why it was so important for them to, pull everything off of Essex Street and take it out to Paradise Road and right into the sewer system. That other parking lot is, there's, again, that stream that runs underground, they built on top of it, everything's sunk in.
Right.
And it's not connected to the proper drainage, so, that's kind of what you get. But those are drainage issues, and unfortunately, if you look at the FEMA maps, or even the wetland maps, it's not on there.
They're not going to be on there,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking there's also two other spots on Paradise Road that are prone to
Yep.
flooding. There's
Yeah.
one that's near the family,
Family
what is it,
doctors.
the Family Doctors?
Yeah.
And then there is Elmwood Road
Yep.
at Paradise.
Yep.
There's a,
Yep.
there's a then there was a flash flood there that took out an entire block of
Yep.
cars and filled everyone's
know.
basement to the
So
first
those
floor
are things that the
within the
town
last
can
15
actually,
years.
if I'm not mistaken, reading through all this stuff, that the town can actually report to the state, unless it's strictly which it could be strictly a drainage issue, which,
Yeah.
has nothing to do with the state.
Right.
It has to be like a naturally occurring thing.
Yeah.
Like the way Phillips Park just floods, and it's just, the water just rushes in and we're,
Yeah.
you know,
How do you qualify naturally flooding, though? I mean, that's the thing that's sort of hard, because I think of like even the end of Monument that floods every significant rainfall. It doesn't cause damage because it's actually a good flood basin in the sense of a slow drain and on we go. But that Elmwood Road incident was tremendous. It was a fluke storm, but it
Which
just,
side of Elmwood Road?
everything from, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on Thomas Road down.
so was
The
it all,
borough.
was it were the sewers clogged, was it drainage?
It had to do with the
overwhelmed?
fact that it was high tide
Yeah.
and those
So
street
that's-
drains go
What
to,
happens to them now?
they go to the ocean. It was high tide and the water had
Right.
nowhere to go.
So that
and it-
could be attributed to sea level rise, okay? When the table becomes so much higher,
Yeah.
and now what's coming.
And
up-
it might actually be captured. I don't have the map in front of
Yeah.
me. It might be captured.
Right.
in
We'll have to
that.
look at it, but,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
I think, unfortunately, for the purposes of this overlay district, we can only work with what
With
is
what we've been
indicated
supplied.
on the new NFIP maps, which I haven't seen yet.
I was able to look at it online, but I cannot download it.
They're so big
It's
in file
massive, and you
size.
can- Yeah, and they indicate some way to, for, people that want to use, I mean, I couldn't do it. So you can look at it, but you
Okay.
can't download it. It's
All right,
massive,
Try
yeah.
and figure something out, but I
And
thought they would have been
broken
emailed
down,
to
so
us.
I want to see how the zones are broken down, because they have, they have gotten to another level of
Right.
detail with the mapping, which is great. But we do need to get our hands, figure out how to, print out some massive map that we can actually have, because I think people who want to apply for permits in this area, they should be able to walk into the hall and see see a detailed map.
Yeah, we should
Yeah.
at least have it.
Is
on
it
display.
something that could be added to the mapping that we as a town have?
We do, on GIS, we already have, we have a floodplain layer
but it
that
needs
you
to
can
get
activate, but we'll
Okay.
have to send it out for updating,
Excellent.
yeah. So, but yeah,
But someone had mentioned, was it about having site plan for any of these, any kind of construction in,
yeah, in a floodplain.
yeah, any kind of new construction,
Marblehead, any kind of new construction in a floodplain is, falls under the jurisdiction of site plan review, and we, for our purposes, right now, under site plan, site special permit, any new construction or 800 square foot addition that does fall within the floodplain overlay district
Right.
is required on top of their plans and other standard
They have to
submittals, they have
check
to
it
submit
off,
that
right.
memo, which, when we had that construction on 233 Puritan Road a few months ago, they came forth with that memo that explained
Yeah.
what the long-term effects of,
No, they did a good job.
Yeah.
That was like the only permit I've ever seen that was actually really well done.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so something like
Right.
that, we could require of everybody that
I mean, they
wants
get to build what you want,
You get to build what you want, just
Spending
come
a lot of
and,
money building a nice house, just go through the process.
Right, just-
And he did, and boom.
Yeah. Yeah.
One meeting, and he
Yeah.
had what he wanted, so.
right.
No,
And that
really
memo was just a few short pages. It's not a huge stormwater report that's 500 pages long. It's just a quick memo that summarizes everything, puts it into simple terms, and it explains the long-term effects,
Yeah.
So, short and long-term.
Well, they also had the construction documents that were, properly prepared in terms
Right.
of elevation and stuff like that.
I need to create an archive of exemplary applications.
Exactly. Good example of what to do here.
We actually have that for the historic district.
Yeah.
We have a couple that we've
And it's
referenced.
not a bad idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
would be
Do
good.
that. So, I wouldn't be opposed to doing that, and maybe that's something that we, depending on, if it's a, whole house, that's one thing, he needs to have site plan, but.
Right.
Maybe if it's minor stuff, but it should, have site plan, we could, not either, minimal fee, or, I don't know how we
Yeah.
want to deal with it, but, it's not a bad idea.
Right, and the fee structure is something that we don't have to consider for annual town meeting. That's something,
Right, we can do that
board-specific
anytime.
rules and regulations, you can amend those at any time,
Yeah.
so.
In fact, this whole thing, we did separately, this,
Right, when we updated
This
the
whole
rules and
thing.
regs 2 years ago, we had a joint meeting after with the
Right,
ZBA
yeah.
that summer.
so that, and this does not have to be approved by town meeting.
Right,
Okay.
It
Yeah.
says in the bylaw that we shall adopt regulations,
On our
so
own,
that's
yeah.
between ZBA and planning. So that does not have to be, just like subdivision rules and regs do not have to be, they don't go to town meeting.
Right.
We can adopt them, yeah.
That's good, because some of these federal agencies might not still exist by town meeting.
That's very true.
Um,
Okay,
All right.
so I think we were in good shape with that.
Yeah.
yeah.
so.
I think the biggest thing that didn't exist before, at least that I could find in our CFOAD bylaw, was the designation of the community floodplain administrator, and when I was
Yeah.
at the training a couple weeks ago, that was one thing that they really talked about. So Marzi and I spoke with Gino. Gino
I was gonna
has
say,
the
That's such a great
certification.
suggestion.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
So, but he also wanted to make it so that he could designate Mark, who's his town
Yeah.
engineer, to do it as well if Gino is,
Yeah.
if
I
Gino
was-
steps out of that
I was
role.
really happy to see that.
So,
That's terrific.
yeah.
Great.
Where it should live, so, okay. So I've got my, little notes and stuff I did in here, I'll do the same thing. And I essentially just, my little like, this should say this instead, or, but it's not, what am I trying to say?
Substantial,
Thank you.
consequential.
Nothing that I feel like the board's gonna need me to spend time discussing. It's like, or just other types of edits.
Right.
Okay.
All right, so I can send that stuff to you.
So for next meeting, so sort of working calendar-wise, going, town meeting, we typically is like this, do the second or third week in May, right? So last year, Pete, Kane, and I had the community meeting outside of planning board where we,
Yep,
we ran it out of the community development office, had it in here, just did a quick presentation on the upcoming amendments. That way people had another platform to express their questions or concerns, whatever, and then we had the planning board hearing. So I'm happy to host that again. I am out the last week of March and the week of the 24th and 31st. And I'm trying to remember, I feel like every year it changes, but when do we typically do we have in April, do we do a separate public hearing? Like we have a regular monthly meeting and then we do a separate public hearing?
yeah,
for
unless
the-
it was like, I think one time we might have just had the public hearing as part of it when it
Yeah.
was just some little tiny change.
Right.
But typically we'll have a separate meeting.
Okay.
with The public hearing.
So then I could probably do a community meeting sometime in the beginning of April, like before a
Okay.
regular meeting, and then at the regular meeting, we'll probably touch up on any last details, and then have the
Okay.
public hearing at the end of April.
That's
Yeah,
fine
I
with
think that
me.
sounds right. Do we have any new things in the pipeline that we should be expecting to, see coming up
For like filing matters,
for us? Yeah, just.
I think, so for March, we can expect the plans for Zero Manson Road.
Okay,
Um,
and that'd be a preliminary,
those will be
Sub.
prelims, yeah, I
Okay.
talked to Chris Drukas, explained that they should really be prelim. We'll have the prelim plans for 450 Paradise.
yep, that's fine.
I
Now,
don't,
I do know that there is rumblings of a March special town
Oh, yeah,
meeting.
that's a whole other thing.
yeah,
And would there be any logic in, is there anything that needs to be presented
I would
in there?
never, ever.
Never want to.
Present a zoning article at a special
Yeah.
town meeting.
No, not present it, but I mean, answer questions on it or
No.
anything like that.
I don't want to get.
Not at this one.
First of all, it's just.
Poison it.
yeah, I don't,
Yeah.
I just
Okay.
don't. No.
yeah.
I think
So-
it's
And so then in terms of,
complete waste.
I guess, deliverables, for lack of a better word, for our March meeting where it concerns zoning bylaw amendments, ADU, I'll do a red line version. I'll get that list of properties that would be exempt or would fall outside of the transit
Yeah.
radius. And then, see if I can find some best practices on short-term rentals from other municipalities, so that we might have something to work off of.
I think we might have had a bunch of stuff that, when we first talked about it, when
We talked,
Molly was here.
yeah, when Molly was here a
I
few
have
years
all
ago.
I can check my files and see
Yeah.
if I have anything, but, yeah, anyway, go ahead.
And then, so I guess, obviously this is something we'll want to talk about with Ted and Bill here next month, but do we have like any sort of direct, like obviously doing a red line of the site plan special permit stuff is going to be like literally 2 red lines, because there are 2 red lines and that, or 2 lines dedicated to the requirements in
Yeah.
that section of the
Well,
bylaw.
where else does it appear in the zoning bylaw?
Just in section 5400, and then everything else is within the rules and regulations,
Okay,
which are separate. So
okay, so that's.
I guess the only sort of, I guess I'm leaving this meeting still feeling like we don't have a clear answer on where we want to, like, it seems like eliminating the square footage for new construction is probably what we might end up agreeing on, but where do we stand on the addition aspect of it?
I thought Ken made a very good comment about the 15% footprint
Yep.
square footage.
We had something similar to that in the zoning bylaw where it dealt with additions to single and two-family non-conforming structures. Or single and two-family non-conforming properties or structures, which is what we eliminated last year. And it was this, honestly, I think all for the better, but, it was this crazy rule where, like, if you were going to build a conforming addition, but it exceeded 15% of the existing gross square footage, it had to come before the ZBA for relief. And then the ZBA would look at it and say, what are we giving relief for? This is a
Right.
dimensionally
That's why it
conforming.
belongs in site plan.
That's
It's
why it
not
belongs in site
relief.
plan.
Right,
It's not relief.
it's not relief, yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's
there's
why
like,
this drives me nuts.
right,
You know, people get so confused, like, oh, it'll go to ZBA, it's a Board of Appeals.
right,
I mean, they're not
right.
reviewing anything
Right.
else.
Exactly. So like these additions were coming, they were completely conforming, they were 20 feet or more back from the rear lot line, 7.5 feet or more back from the sides, they respected the 35 feet, 2.5 stories, you know? So that's why we changed the bylaw last year, to offer, to create protections for single and two-family structures in line with what MGL already does. And if you are building a conforming addition to a single or two-family home that either is non-existing, that is non-conforming already structurally, or is on a non-conforming property, or both, so long as the addition is conforming, it does not need zoning relief. If it currently meets the triggers for site plan special permit, then yes, it has to come before the planning board. But if it's 500 square feet as of right now, and you're gonna build it completely conforming, it does not require review
Right.
before any board.
Yeah.
I think for that meeting, Marissa, if you could just pull the relevant section, I mean, I know we could all probably do it, but just,
Yeah.
we have a packet.
Yeah.
You could just highlight the thresholds.
Yeah.
And that way we can just look at it and talk about it.
Well, so that's the thing, there are, for a site plan special permit, you mean?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Because
I-
right now,
You know, as far as the, new house, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that's my opinion. I feel
Yeah.
very strongly about that. And I think we can sell at the town meeting. I don't think I have any trouble, or I, or whoever else wants to present it would have any trouble doing that, because there's so much data behind it. In terms of the addition, so look, 5,000 square foot house could put up a 750 square foot addition without having to get any kind of a permit.
that's 15%.
Right. You know,
I guess part of me thinks that someone with a smaller house should actually be able to put on more, someone might have a smaller house and need more space than someone with a bigger
Yeah.
house.
But
Yeah.
one of the things there that gets so dangerous, just from a design standpoint, and the
Yeah.
impact is very often those smaller houses have adjacencies to smaller houses.
Sure.
And then you can really overwhelm. I mean, here's my very
I was
sophisticated
gonna say, do you
sketch.
remember
But-
HDC last year? We had that house on Ellis Road that built the addition to the rear.
Mm-hmm.
Bob Zarelli did the architectural drawings, and it passed with flying colors before the
Right.
HDC, but it otherwise was not regulated by planning or
Not at all.
ZBA. And I know the person who lives on Paradise Road, who now has to look at that addition and she came to me and said, do I really have any like standing with this? And I said,
Yeah.
she said, is it worth it for me to come to the HDC meeting? I said, not for the concerns that you're having. I said,
I mean, it is something that we would have had a hard time defending dimensionally.
yeah,
If that had been added, where it was secondary elevations, it was glimpses, the public way is all that we're
Right.
Right.
charged with. And the impact, like I've driven by it recently, the impact from
How big
driving
an
down the
addition?
streets, it almost doubled the house.
yeah, it was big.
how
Yeah.
big was it? We didn't see it.
It wasn't
No.
a big house. It's a
Oh, so it was
relatively
under,
small.
it was
It
under.
was under site plan,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
but dimension, and again, dimensionally
just looked so
conforming, so it
big,
didn't even
right.
come before ZBA.
Right.
Yeah.
But with respect to the
I
existing
get it,
structure and the
yeah.
lot size.
And the impact on the neighbors, but there's no, it
There's no recourse,
completely
yeah.
altered the neighbors' backyards
Yeah.
because now this
would
is
make
in
me
there.
crazy.
Same discussion on the property that's, up from Danvers, that's up the hill from Danvers Road, and I can't think of the name of the street.
Eastman Ave.
Eastman Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
This is a hard thing because
It is.
these have a lot of implications
Yep.
within the neighborhood, and I think we addressed as much as we could on that, but
Right.
it is,
It's interesting.
it's very impactful
Yeah.
when things like that happen. All of that said, the addition was done very well. It is something that, that creates, but it was, you know, they did everything right.
Right.
And it was not egregious in the sense the family has 5 children, and they were in a house they liked,
Yeah.
and, you know, the whole thing made very good sense.
Well, let's look at the percentage then. I mean, I'm happy with that. And I think if we can kind of
Because
just think about it and,
the
it's
reason the
reasonable.
800 feet that I react to, 20 by 20 is the minimum dimensions for a 2-car
Yeah.
garage. And that's a 2-car garage with a full 20 by 20 on top of it.
right,
That is the smallest footprint that you'd be looking at. And then
Well, the
And the
footprint
20
can
by-
be 10 by 10,
can be 20 by 40.
20 by 40, thank you.
20 by 40, which is the largest,
Right.
or,
The
you know,
footprint
or
could
10
be-
by 80, but it's
Right.
not happening.
The footprint could be 400 square feet, but,
Right, the footprint could be 400 square feet up to 800
Yeah.
square feet. And even a 400, you know, that's where the problem lies, is that is not that's not a small
Yeah.
structure.
no.
I hear you.
I also think, as I said before, I think it's really good for things to be reviewed, for community members to be able to express, because, you know, there's a lot of neighbors that want their neighbors happy.
Right, and those were some of the comments that came up when, at town meeting last year, when ironically, I thought that the MBTA community bylaw was going to be the one that held the floor for an hour and a half, and it was this protections to the single
Yeah.
and two-family non-conforming ones.
Right.
And some of the concerns that came up from town meeting members
Right.
was, if this no longer goes before ZBA, what is my chance to comment as an abutter?
right.
Will I get notified? Yes, if it goes to planning,
Yeah.
but not necessarily if it goes
sense.
to ZBA.
All right,
Marissa,
so-
when you print out those next week, could you also just make a note about the fees? Because
Yeah, I can print out the current fee schedule
Okay.
too.
Yeah,
that'd
we
be
can
helpful.
definitely go over that
Okay,
too.
great.
Yeah.
I think that was when we opted for the historic district to not have a fee attached to it. That was part of the reason this community was able to pass it.
Behind it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was like, it took away a perceived hardship.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
really, some of the projects that are going through review might be $1,000,
Right.
$1,000
Right,
project.
which is a lot.
To pay $450 to have
Agreed.
a board review it,
Right.
you know,
Yep.
is crazy.
Right.
And that was, you know, I've seen that. In San Francisco, there was a friend of ours whose stairs came down and ended 14 inches above the sidewalk, and then there had to be one step and it was on a historic house, and the step got destroyed. And they had to pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars for a step just to get through the permitting
Oh,
process.
jeez.
God.
Yeah,
That's a lot.
and you just have to, you want to be careful about that.
Yeah.
Because that is not, that's not really, and, you know, unless it is a revenue that we are desperate to get, it just doesn't seem like.
No, I think the big building permits are one thing, but like this other stuff is,
Yeah.
you know, we can definitely take the foot off the pedal with that.
Okay, great. Do we have meeting
Thank you.
minutes?
I don't have meeting minutes, I'm sorry, but I'll
Okay.
have them next time. so.
That was really helpful discussion.
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
you
Thank you.
guys. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Anything else
And you
not
too, Marissa.
reasonably anticipated?
No, sir.
No,
All right.
I would make a motion
Okay.
to
All right,
Sure.
okay.
adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thanks
All right.
so much.